Book 2. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for my first video of March, which is going to be a review of Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. Now, this is a reread for me. I read this years ago when my good friend Jessica, she was a big vampire fan, and she loved the book and the movie, so I decided to read it at the time for her, and I liked it. I didn't absolutely love it, but I did like Anne Rice's writing, and I like how much history she puts into her books, how much depth. So this is a vampire story that is, I think, a lot of vampire fans will like a lot more than Twilight, especially since the vampires don't sparkle as people like to complain about most when it comes to Twilight. Although I think there are more important things to criticize in Twilight than the fact that the vampires sparkle. But our main vampire character is Louis Deloc. And we are in the present day, of which would be the 90s, I imagine, when this book was written. And Louis is telling a eager young journalist his life story. So we learn of how he was made into a vampire by the infamous Lestat, and how they have very different views of vampirism, and how he was determined not to feed off of human blood, and ends up accidentally feeding off of this 5-year-old girl and Lestat decides to make her a vampire and make her part of their family, and Louis forms an attachment to Claudia, and they both end up not liking Lestat, and Claudia wants to punish Lestat, and they are both obsessed with finding if there are other vampires like them and understanding their existence, although for little varying reasons. This book is, like I said, very dark and very erotic. Definitely not a vampire story for just anybody, I feel like. It's very dark and sensual, and I think the way a lot of people like their vampires, and like I said, you see the vicious monsters that vampires can be, their lack of feeling for others, while you also have a romanticized view. And again, don't worry, it's not like Twilight. It's like Louis, ironically, his vampire enhanced senses allow him to appreciate humanity a lot more and see the beauty in the world around him. He loves art and literature, and he appreciates his world so much more. And as I said, him and Lestat are very opposing vampires. Like, Lestat is the traditional monster. He has no problem playing with his food and torturing humans, and just has this devil-may-care attitude. And when Louis, or later Claudia, ask him questions, he refuses to answer them, and in fact snaps at Claudia a couple times when she tries to ask him how she was made and everything, and trying to understand and ask how vampires work, if there are other vampires like them. And they also kind of start to realize that Lestat might not have the answers they're seeking. But at least he is a monster. He is, acts how vampires are perceived, as a monster. While you have Louis, who, as I said, refuses to feed on human blood. He tries, except for he's had occasional mess ups, because of course it's hard as a vampire. It's hard to resist human blood when you're hungry. I mean, imagine if you hadn't eaten for days on end and you were given a piece of steak. Like, what would you do? And Louis does give in. He feels shame. He feels horrible about what he's done. He gets attached to humans, And Lestat is telling him, you miss your humanity. You have lost that humanity. You may as well enjoy it because you're super strong and fast, and you have power over humans. You can seduce them, and you have all these abilities. Yet you cannot appreciate it. But I think Lewis, for him, it's not that because he actually likes being a vampire because it does allow him to be able to have all these enhanced senses. He just appreciates humanity for what it is and the beauty of it, and kind of misses it. Like, the difference between Lewis, Lestat, and Claudia as well is that, and later Armand, because there's another vampire that Lewis meets and forms a very strong relationship with. Is that Lewis he lived a long enough life and a good life. He was very privileged. He had his own family, he had his own plantation. And of course, because of the time period, he had slaves. So there was, the book does not focus on that, but we do see the slaves getting killed by the vampires and drained of their blood. So it doesn't focus on it too much, but it is there. And the slaves become fearful of Lestat and Lewis because they realize that they're vampires. They are smart and they know, these are monsters. We either need to try to kill them or get away from here. But he has lived a good life. He has 11 siblings, although his relationship with his brother is shaken up because his brother, who goes into the priesthood, starts to claim he has visions, and Lewis doesn't believe him and dismisses him. And then when his brother gets killed, he blames himself for that. He feels guilty about it because he didn't believe his brother about his visions, his propheticness. And but other than that, he has a good life with his mom and his siblings, his sister, and he ends up, and so he can appreciate when he's dead. He can appreciate what he missed in his life. He has a reason to see humanity as not bad, as something that he was fortunate to experience in his life. While you have Lestat, there's implications that he didn't have a great life, that his dad forced things on him he didn't want to do, and then he resents having to take care of his dad because his dad is seriously ill and dying. So and there's a lot of things he can't do. Part of the reason why he first goes to Lewis is because he knows there are things that Lewis knows and can do, like practical things that Lewis can help him with. So that's why he set sights on Lewis. And in my opinion, I feel like Lestat was very lonely, had a very lonely existence, even though he doesn't want to admit it. I feel like he needs Lewis. And later you find out, I feel like Claudia is the same way, except for with Claudia, she's willing to admit that she is lonely, that she needs him, that she loves Lewis, but she also hates him. And so Lestat has every reason to resent humanity and like his life as a vampire a lot better because he has all these enhanced senses. He's super strong, super fast. He can dominate humans. He wants revenge on humanity for his life being sucky, basically. Now, there is a book on Lestat's life. There's 2 Lestat books because I think he's a fan favorite. So Anne Rice wrote 2 books. When she started writing these again, got back into writing her vampire books, I think that's when she wrote Prince Lestat. But there's the Vampire Lestat. And and I think Lestat is part of Queen of the Damned too. I haven't read it, but I have seen the movie adaptation, which was years ago, so I don't remember it, so I can't really compare the movie adaptations. And I did watch a little bit of the TV show adaptation of Interview with a Vampire, and I just wasn't in the mood to watch the rest of it, so I stopped watching it. And now it's kind of too late because we don't have we have AMC, but we don't have the streaming network. So I'm hoping that they will do a marathon, maybe of the first season, so that people can catch up. But anyway, all these abilities make him really love being a vampire and preferring that over humanity, over being human. So then you have Claudia, who was sired, using a Buffy term, when she was 5 years old. She was just a little child, which I totally forgot how young she was, because, I know that she is in the Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise movie adaptation of this. She's played by Kristen Dunst, who's probably like 10 or 12 at the time. She might be like 10, because I think she was like 12 or 13 when she did Little Women, which I think she did after Interview with the Vampire. And then I know, even though I didn't watch all of the first season, I only watched an episode or two. Actually, really only one episode, which I kind of wish I had continued with it. But she is older. They cast her older, which I'm wondering if people are gonna have a problem with that, because the fact that she's 5 years old in the book makes it all the more terrifying and disturbing when Lestat turns her into a vampire and Lewis kills her. That's why she hates Lewis. She sees the evil within Lestat, but she hates Lewis. But she also loves him because she sees him as as a father. And metaphorically speaking, Lewis would probably be like the mother figure, the more nurturing one, and then Lestat would be the abusive father. And so she was not around a long enough time. She barely remembers what happened to her. She was only 5 years old and, missed her mom, was looking for her mom and asking where she was. And I think the mom was dead. And so when she gets turned, she doesn't remember anything of her human life until she starts to get mentally older. She grows in her mind and emotionally. She matures, but she is stuck in this body as a child, in this vampire body forever, a child. So she doesn't know what she's missing. She didn't really get a chance to see her and really experience human life. But she's aware of that she is limited because she is a child. She physically is a child, so people will always see her as a child. Even Lewis sees her as his little girl, his little baby girl. And so she wants to grow up, wants to be, it has wisdom that you can see in her eyes, and a vicious streak like Lestat, but she will forever be a child, physically. So it's almost tragic. She's the most tragic character in the whole story because of that, because she can't physically grow up. And like I said, she loves her guardians, Lewis. Well, more so Lewis than Lestat. But she also, like I said, hates him because he did this to her. He was the one that killed her, even though Lestat was the one that turned her, that sired her. So it's so heartbreaking to watch her struggle, and and to see that she is human. To see that she is a woman on the inside, but physically she is not a woman, and so she can't do a lot of the things and can't have a relationship with another adult vampire because she's not an adult. She will not be seen as an adult. And her, there are things that she can't do as physically a child. One of the themes of this is the nature of evil, because of course we're dealing with vampires, and vampires are seen as evil. They're demons from hell. And Lewis is struggling with the fact, his evil nature. He still cares about humanity, like I said. Which is interesting because most stories when it comes to vampires say vampires have no soul because they're not human. They're dead. They're undead, and so they died and then came back as this rotting corpse. Not rotting, but because they look beautiful, but they're basically a corpse with ability to think and they have a brain, and they the they need, and what fuels them keeps them moving is blood, is human blood or animal blood. So they explore a lot of the nature of evil, what is evil. There's a lot of discussions that Lewis has. He tries to have them with Lestat, but Lestat is not very forthcoming. And then later he meets Armand and forms a bond with him, as I said, and they start talking. And, like, Armand, he feels like evil doesn't exist, really. There's no good or evil. I mean, they just exist. Like that, why would God exist if they exist? Like, why would God allow these monsters to be created? That's how he feels. So he's like, I am not evil because evil doesn't exist. It's just there are people that do things, or maybe that evil does exist, but it's just like there's no one pulling the strings. There's no devil or there's no God. They just are. They just exist. His relation with Armand is very interesting. Like it's another way that love is explored, a dark kind of love, because of Lewis is caught between Claudia and Armand in the book, and he doesn't like the other one thinks they're in control. The one thinks they're controlling Claudia thinks Armand is controlling Lewis, and Armand probably thinks that Claudia is controlling Lewis. And so it's a heartbreaking situation because you kind of feel bad for Lewis, but I also kind of felt a little bit more bad for Claudia because there's only so much she can do because, like I said, she is physically a child and Armand is a grown-ass man, so who can take care of himself. I mean, it is sad that because he loves in any way, whatever way he can, he loves Lewis. I mean, in a way, it's insta love, but I feel like I can forgive it with vampires because they're beyond humanity, and the connection that vampires have, especially with their victims or with each other, is like instinctive and it's almost animalistic, and just like you just feel it. And there might be a power that Armand has. Like, there's a book about Armand that I would love to, that I would like to read. Like, I definitely will continue with this series and read the other books. I'm going to take my time, though, with it. Because there are, it's very intense, these books. And there's some intimate scenes, like, they don't have sex, but, especially when they're drinking human blood, which Buffy the Vampire Slayer implies this too. They don't spell it out for you, but well, I guess in a way they do, especially the scene when Buffy is being like fed off of by Angel, but in the beginning, especially in the beginning of the series, there was very much a metaphor thing. This is kind of more literal with that. Like, it's very, like, Anne Rice's writing is very descriptive and elegant and very sensual, and like I said, the book is very erotic, and I do think there are gay undertones with the characters, in the suggestion that maybe they're gay or bisexual. I don't know, but I do believe in the later Prince Lestat is, I think it is just that Lestat is gay, but I am not sure. I have not read it. But I think Terry said that. I mean, although she might not remember because it's been a long time since we talked about the book. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some of that in there. Like, definitely, I mean, and Armand and Lewis, their developing relationship is very, I feel like, as close to a human romance as you can get with the vampires. And like I said, it's even more sensual, I feel like, when it comes to vampires. And it's the process of biting, a vampire biting you, is very sexual and very sensual, the act of it. And like I said, she's very descriptive with that. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, the way she writes it. And it's like basically, it's like reading an intimate scene between two humans. um, but it's also very tragic. And despite the fact that, Muslim vampires have no hearts, their hearts are not beating, or that they're dead inside, I always feel they feel a lot more strongly than we give them credit than what we are told. Because Lewis is very heartbroken and struggling in the last half. And so I feel like they feel a lot more strongly than we do. Even though they're not supposed to, supposedly. And then eventually, it's like once the pain is over, then they become numb to it. That's my interpretation. But this was really good, and I'm glad I read it again. I was not sure if I would or not, because, I was trying to read her other books, but, the Mayfair Witches trilogy the books are long, although surprisingly the longest book, or at least that's what it looks like, the longest book is the first book, and then the other two are surprisingly not as long. I mean, but it could be that they just don't look that way, the way they're made, the way they're published. But anyway, I figured, why don't I go ahead and jump into this book and read this one, because it's not as long, which is even shorter than I expected, because, it's still, still a chunkster. It's still, if you don't read the excerpt from Prince Lestat, it's 340 pages. And that's still, still a chunky book. I mean, it's not, less than 200 pages. But, I don't know, I guess because the mass market makes them look a little thicker than what it is, than the actual length it is. But I'm glad that I read it, because there was a lot of stuff I didn't remember. I didn't remember the Armand stuff. I knew he was a character that was in the story, but I didn't remember all that part when they meet him and stuff like that. I mean, I vaguely recall scenes from the movie, and I'm very confused. I'll have to look up the movie and see what part Antonio Banderas plays, because he is in the movie, and I always thought he was Armand, but then the way he's described and the way Antonio Banderas looks in the movie, that's how the vampire Santiago looks. While Armand is completely different. So I'll have to double check on that. Look at the IMDb page or something. But anyway, this was really good. And if you want something to contrast Twilight, and you haven't read this series yet, the Vampire Chronicles series by Anne Rice, it's really good. Her writing is excellent and very, very delectable to read. And don't worry, like I said, yes, there's romanticism to the vampires through Lestat, but it's not, through Lewis, but it's not, like I said, it's not sappy and, it's not sappy and ridiculous like Twilight. And which, by the way, I like Twilight, so if any of you are Twilight fans still, because I know a lot of people have recently converted away from Twilight, and have seen because it's not, I think it's still a fun story. But anyway, you might prefer this. It's not exactly, it's not I'm trying to think of a vampire story, and it also focuses more on vampires. I know the disappointing aspect of Dracula, what for me was that I didn't think about the fact that it was kind of more a hero story. It was more focused on Jonathan Harker and Mina and their whole all and those characters and them hunting Dracula and how Dracula was the shadow looming in the background, the threat in the background. Like this, that sadly is what disappointed me because I didn't even think about that. Like, unfortunately, I think pop culture kind of ruined Dracula for me because, the way they put Dracula center stage. This one, the vampires are center stage. And it does get very philosophical, by the way. Like I said, they're discussing the nature of evil. And while Lewis is observing everything, he is thinking a lot about his nature and the nature of those like him a lot. But it doesn't wax on it. It doesn't do it like, it doesn't talk about it too much, like in a boring way. But yeah, this is very good, a really dark but very good story. And like I said, at some point I am going to continue. I don't know when though. Hopefully maybe on thrift books. I have seen it. I gotta make sure that it's not the mass market, that it's the one that is like this if I buy it there. But anyway, that is my review of Interview with the Vampire. Please check it out if you love vampires. I also decided that this would be when I would reread it. Mostly in February. I read it mostly in February. But I ended it on March 1st. I finished it on March 1st. What was I gonna say? I picked, this was kind of inspired. I have been wanting to reread this, but what motivated me to finally reread it in February was actually because I intended to participate in the We Love Jenny readathon. Jennifer Brooks, the booktuber, has sadly passed away, and they were doing Christy from Dostoevsky in Space. Forgive me if I mispronounced anything in your name. But she hosted a readathon in February, and that was We Love Jenny readathon, where you read any book that she was a favorite of hers that she loved, read about historical figures that she was passionate about, listen to her favorite type of music, like K-pop, for instance. And I was trying to decide what I wanted to read because there were all these other books I wanted to read too, that I didn't know if she liked them or, if she. So I figured, let me just read this one in her name, because it is one of her favorite vampire books. And like I said, I'm glad I reread it because I loved it. And so that is my review for Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. If you guys like this video, please click subscribe and give a thumbs up if you did. And click the bell icon if you want to be notified about my latest videos. And I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!